Hello, and welcome to episode 75 of the Pos-cast with Rabbi Shmuel Posner, myself, Seth Hellman. Rabbi, how are we doing today?
Baruch Hashem, we're fine. I am coming to you live from President Street in Brooklyn, New York, in Crown Heights, because that's where I am. There's a wedding I have to be at 4 o'clock, and here we are. Well, nobody knows I'm recording this, so 4 o'clock doesn't matter. So I'm in Crown Heights. Came last night. Here I am. Went to the oil yesterday, even though I went to the oil on Sunday with Chani, but that was we went early in the morning because she had to be back. We went on Sunday, yeah, because she had to be back Monday for work. So we drove in and drove back in the same day. And so I didn't have quality time at the oil, so I came back. I mean, I had to come back for the wedding anyway, but she said, "You were just at the oil on Sunday." I said, "No, that wasn't. I just went in for 5 minutes. I wasn't focused. I didn't get it," which is a whole nother subject about what get it really means. But I went back, connected, and here I am today. And with us, shall I introduce our guest? Rabbi Moshe Gray, who was the Chabad Shliach in Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you guys are close to each other.
I don't know how close. I don't actually know technically where Dartmouth is compared to where I am. I know it's in Hanover, but it doesn't really mean anything to me.
Where are you, Seth?
Kingston.
I don't know where that is.
It's over by Exeter and Epping.
Oh, yeah. I know that area really well, actually.
I don't understand.
Yeah, so Dartmouth is just not even remotely close. It's on the entire other side of the state.
It's an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes, but you were right next to Sig.
Sig?
Oh, no. Seth, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do know what he's talking about.
This pickle of a state, you guys don't know which other origin. Okay, so our good friend Yonis Binyamin, a.k.a. Jonathan, was at Rabbi Gray's house last week, and he mentioned the Pos-cast. And I said so he told me that. I said to Moshe Leib, "Hey, you want to come on?" He said, "Yes." Little did I know that not only is his first time as a guest on the Pos-cast, it's the first time he's ever even heard of the Pos-cast, which maybe that's a good reason to have him on, just so he should know that it exists and should know that there's 74 episodes prior to this one, and he should catch up. Okay.
You know, I thought that Homesick for Lubavitch was the first Lubavitch podcast, but apparently not.
You thought of what?
That Homesick for Lubavitch and Ben Siavtson.
Oh.
but you're the OG, it seems like.
I don't know. First of all, you shouldn't be mentioning other podcasts.
Yeah, no free advertising.
Yeah, we do drop names here, but we don't call out other people's. Oh Hashem. Okay, so Moshe Leib, give us a 5-minute intro to who you are, so our listeners can know how you got to where you are, and then we'll see where it goes.
5 minutes. So my brief story is as follows. I was born to two parents who are both Balei Tshuva from the 70s. My dad from Seattle, Washington. My mom from Toronto, Canada. And shortly after I was born, my parents moved to back to Seattle, Washington, where I grew up. I had a great childhood in Seattle, loved it. Wasn't a big community where I grew up, which was sort of where in the Chabad community where the Rebbe had told his shluchim to establish in Seattle. But my school that I grew up going to, the Chabad Day School, was on Frat Row at the University of Washington. And that made for an interesting childhood. So every day we'd go to this huge, big former frat house, literally smack in the middle of Frat Row. And I grew up thinking college kids didn't do much except for throw a football around and drink a lot of beer. Not that I saw them necessarily not that I necessarily saw them drinking a lot of beer, but I saw the aftermath. And they would come use our basketball court, and once we got a little older on Sundays, we would have Sundays. We'd have to go to yeshiva on Sunday, and so we ended up hanging out with these college kids, and between that and my father being a product, becoming frum on campus with Rabbi Samuels, it almost was destined that I should end up being a shliach on a college campus. So that was my childhood. Small class. There were 3 boys that were always in this class, and then we had guys that came in and went out. And then I went away to yeshiva at 14. Had a pretty tumultuous start to my yeshiva experience, and but eventually kind of settled down, figured it out a little bit. Ended up in England and Israel and Canada. We can talk more about those things if that interests you at all. But importantly, I was in the Chabad yeshiva system. We send yeshiva boys at generally around the age of 20, 21. What we call, I don't even know how you call it, the Bacher Peace Corps, if you will. And I was sent to the very glamorous city. Many of my peers wanted to go to Melbourne, Australia, and to South Africa, and to Prague, and I was like very happy to be sent to New Haven, Connecticut. And that's where I spent really an excellent year. It was excellent for a few reasons. One is I was there with really good friends. So we had almost this fraternity-like experience. And second, I got a lot of exposure to campus life at Yale University. Spent a lot of time on campus, learning with students and hanging out with them and Shabbos. And it was a very impactful and experience for me. It was seminal in a lot of ways. And by the time I was done that year, I kind of had figured out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And, that experience and marrying my wife and saying, look, this is something that I think I really want to do. And she was down with it. Now the question was finding a school that was sort of comparable to Yale, that had, I really enjoyed the students and the intellectual rigor that they brought and the curiosity. And so Dartmouth did not have a Chabad house when we got married, and we were looking for shluchas. And we moved here in the fall of 2003 with our then 1-month-old son Mendel, and we've been here ever since. So that's the short 5-minute version of my story.
I don't think it was 5 minutes, but that's pretty incredible. So you had a interaction with college students when you were a kid, and then as a bacher in yeshiva. Pretty good.
Yeah.
I have 1,001 questions about your whole upbringing and the whole parenting thing, but I don't want to. And we should actually have like a series. We can have a series called the MLG Pos-cast series, which would be a subset of the Pos-cast, because to me, like, I'd love to spend a long time talking about having parents that are both Balei Tshuva, how that affected things that go. And I think it's an incredible subject that somebody is going to write a lot of books about and get half a dozen PhDs, because a person who grows up not observant and becomes observant doesn't lose that part of their life. And how do they integrate and how do you deal with it? It's fascinating when I see people, I see second generation. I see a lot of second generations because I've been on campus doing the math 18 years longer than you have been. Not that we're counting anything or comparing anything, but it comes a time I'm now in New York for the wedding of an alumni, and it's not their first wedding; it's like their third or whatever. I don't know my own kids. I don't worry about their kids, but Kanai Naharis, and to see what's come, to me that's like really incredible, and I can see a lot of differences and stuff that's going on, and I think that's something that should be talked about and thought about and dealt with, because how do you raise kids if you aren't raised a certain? You raise your kids where you were raised. It's like, always everybody thinks I'm really different than my parents, and then you grow up and all of a sudden you realize, OMH, that's Oh My Hashem, I'm doing exactly what my father used to do, and I always said to myself, I'm never going to be like that, or your mother, and so you try to correct it a little bit, but sometimes you just find you're doing the same thing, and sometimes your kids say, why da 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 da, and you're thinking, I'm doing that because that's how I was raised. But anyway, that's not the subject I want to talk about. I want to talk about your interaction with kids on campus. And I appreciated what you said. You wanted to go to a university that was similar to Yale because of intellectual and probing minds.
He's taking
Which
a dig at our Chabad house, Rabbi.
I still taking a dig at our Chabad house. I'm it's not a dig. It's just a matter of fact. I mean, it's.
I think we have way
Certainly
more
was
fun than
not.
those intellectuals. They take it way too seriously.
No, well, look. Here's another thing. I want to put this out there. I think because I've Baruch Hashem, I think 90% of my classmates, which maybe I don't know, I just throw that number out, but a vast majority of my classmates went on shlichus, and we're on very different places. And I'm thinking back as knowing them as Bachrim and seeing where they are now. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, for example, Avramela Plotkin is a rabbi in Toronto, to a South African community. He's soft spoken, he's thoughtful, he's caring. He's like, yeah, that's perfect for him. He wouldn't work on a college campus. He doesn't raise his voice and dance on tables. He's like it's perfect for him. He's exactly where he belongs. And like a bunch of other guys like that, where it just makes sense that people end up where they're supposed to be. So we can talk about differences between universities and not be demeaning at all, because they're, probably, intellectual people are probably boring and obnoxious. Everybody has their ups and their downs. So it's not like, but there is a difference. Ay, ay, ay. I mean,
Yeah,
once,
you bring up a lot of interesting points. I just, go back to my parents for a minute. Especially my father. I don't think he lost a lot by becoming religious. I mean, he still was very engaged in the things that he brought with him, and I was the first. This is not a bragging. Maybe I am bragging. I don't know. I was the first religious Jewish kid in the city of Seattle to play Little League, because my dad played baseball. He played on his company softball team. His dad, my grandfather, Al Shalom, who I never met, played baseball at actually a really high level. And so it was sort of like you said, like you bring up the kids the way you were brought up. And so, this was part of my childhood, yet it was very ingrained in it, and it meshed well with Frumkeit. And so at 13, when all the games shifted to Shabbos, that was the end of my fledgling baseball career. But the campus thing, yeah. I think Yitzi Lowenthal, who's a fantastic shliach of the Rebbe in Denmark, which is part of my story also, because my parents had moved to Denmark for 3 years when I was 15. And at the time, Denmark did not have a Chabad house. And by the time my parents left, Chabad had moved there in the form of Yitzi and Rachel Lowenthal. My parents played a role in bringing them out. And so I've remained sort of close to Yitzi over the years. And I remember one early conference of shluchim in New York. It was after the banquet, and for those who have been to the banquet or watched this know how charged and energized that is. But the banquet is almost like, for the shluchim, it's the pregame. The real show, the real thing, is after the banquet, where all the shluchim go back to 770 and farbrang all night. Although it's been a number of years since I've stayed up all night, but this one particular year, and it was fairly early on, I want to say maybe 2008, 2009, 2007, somewhere around there. I get back to Crown Heights from the banquet, and the upstairs Beit Medrash where the Farbrengen took place, I mean, you could not get near it. It was so packed to the gills. And I'm not a pushy guy. I didn't grow up in Crown Heights, so I didn't grow up elbowing my way, in the Rebbe's Farbrengens. So I kind of just went downstairs to the main show of 770. And I don't remember how I bumped into Yitzi, and I said, Yitzi, it's crazy up there. I can't get in. And he says, let's farbrang downstairs. And so we somehow got a hold of a bottle of mashka or something. We sat down in the back of 770. We started farbranging. And I remember two things from that night. One is before I turned around, the entire Farbrengen from upstairs had migrated downstairs. And the Farbrengen ended up downstairs. And I think it's the only time in the last 20 years that that's actually happened. And so I take credit for that. And we can get into the details of why that was kind of a historic Farbrengen. But before it got big, I remember Yitzi Farbrengen and saying something to me along the lines. He's like, you know, Moshe, you're one of the few guys that I know on Shluchas who actually chose to go on Shluchas. Right? It wasn't like a foregone conclusion that you were going to go, but you sort of developed this want and you moved out on sort of your own volition. I'm paraphrasing him. And it's always stuck with me, that idea, because it there's I feel a certain sense of responsibility to that choice. As opposed to maybe some of my friends who, like, it was a foregone conclusion they were always going to move on shlichus, and so there they are, and they're just sort of doing it. I bring this up because I know this will trigger some version of a response from Rabbi Posner. But it's, you know, this is a podcast. These are these memories that come up.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that. I don't know who I said it to, but I think there was like a year, 2-3 years ago, you like posted on the shluchim chat or something, anybody want to farbring? And I said yes, and we got on the phone for like a couple of hours or something. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember exactly what we talked about, but I do remember, I think it's such a powerful thing that to have be able to, like, farbring means you can like, you sat down with a guy and it wasn't prepared. It wasn't like, okay, now we're going to farbring about this. You know, they invite you and you have to prepare. And people have done that to me, and I hate it. I mean, I do it because whenever someone asks me to do something, I think it's my responsibility to do it. But I can't stand it because I don't want to prepare like an hour-long show and I have to think what I'm going to say. I just want to, like, let it go. That's why my wife always says, your therapy session is the Shabbos table. You just start talking about everything under the sun and everything that's bothering you, and you sit and you hack and you hack and you hack. And one time, and where I sit at the Shabbos table, the clock is behind me. And I remember it was like a month ago or whatever. And Chani says to me, my wife says to me, she says, do you know how long you just talked? I said, I don't know, like 10, 15 minutes. 50 minutes you're speaking straight. And I think that's the beauty of a farbrengen. And of course, if it goes two ways, it's fantastic. It's great. But this idea of, you know, we're getting, I learned with these guys on Thursday, and been this like a couple of years. And he says, a few weeks ago, he said, you know, he always checks in with me. We're learning tomorrow. And he said, are we doing Torah and tangent tomorrow? I said, Torah and tangent? I think it's tangent, and maybe a little Torah comes in along the way. But here we are off on tangents. The idea of shlichus being like a choice versus... there were a couple of my classmates that did not go on shlichus for whatever reason. And I think they felt very guilty. That's what I'm just saying that. I think that it really bugged them because the whole mindset was that, yeah, we're going to go on shlichus. I mean, listening to the Rebbe's farbrengens, forget about what other chassidim, how they, you know, like the Avraham Shem Tovs, the Shem Tovs of the world, and that whole class where, you know, you have to go on shlichus. Even Rabbi Yael would talk a lot about, you know, like the Rebbe made shlichus the thing that you should be doing. And to me, it made sense. Even though, honestly, before I got married, I learned shchita. I spent the summer learning how to shecht animals. I learned chickens. I learned before, and I did it in back of my mind. I did it like maybe I'm not going to go on shlichus. What am I going to do for a living? That was like what was going on in my head. I don't know why I thought that, but that was, you know, just sort of like a security thing. And I mean, my brother is a sheikhet, and my father and my grandparents, you know, my two grandfathers were all shachtim. So it wasn't like something out of nowhere. Like, where'd you get this from? But nonetheless, putting that aside, the idea of going on shlichus definitely was something that was very much ingrained. Like this, what do you want to do? You want to sell diamonds? So you're going to convince someone that this diamond is good for them and they should pay for it. Why not? If you're everybody's selling something. That's what you do for a living. So sell Yiddishkeit. That's what the Rebbe wants, and what's with nothing better? There can be nothing better than that. So yeah, I don't want to start arguing with you but the idea of like having it, I think more what I'm hearing from you is that you had like a path. It wasn't just I'm going to go on shlichus wherever it is. When I got married, we're sitting in Kailo. Like, okay, back in those days, we waited for the shluchim that were out there to come and ask us if they want, if they're, if we want to join them. It was a buyer's market, not a seller's market. So I could have gone anywhere I wanted, and but that was like, so we didn't know where we're going to go. And one thing very different me than you was that, and I told my wife this when we were dating. I said the one place I'm not going to go on shlichus is on campus. Now this is 18 years before it became popular, but that was like, to me, it was like very, very different than you. To me, college students were a foreign thing. I had no idea what they were. And my joke is, when I came to Boston, I thought college students were intelligent, and I got very nervous. That didn't last too long, but
It's
so I'm.
interesting. It's interesting you say that, because I remember bumping into Rabbi Chatzkel Kornfeld once, and he's sort of also an original campus guy. He spent a couple years on campus, and he says, how's it going and everything, and he says, we just couldn't figure out how to make it work, sort of long term. Like, my dad tells me stories of what would happen at the Chabad house on a normal day, on a normal Friday night, and it sounded like it was just a rollicking good time. But I guess what Rabbi Kornfeld was saying is we couldn't figure out how to make a living out of it. We couldn't figure out how to survive, and so what happened is people sort of began to pivot. And so when I got married and we were looking on shlichus, was it I had spent that year at Yale, and all of a sudden there's like this initiative, and there's this guy who I'd never heard of before, from Miami, this donor George Rohr, who's seeding a few Chabad houses, and it was sort of like gravy for us. Like we were planning, if it would work out, we were planning on going regardless. Now, having that seed money made life really much easier. But we would have figured it out, I think. But yes, I think I had a path. I had it was I remember going into the shluchim office at the time. They had Friar Mintz was overseeing shluchim placement, and he says to me, "So, are you interested in pulpit?" I said, "Nope." He says, "What about young adults?" I C teens or whatever. I don't even know the reason. I said, "Nope." I don't want to deal with old people. I don't want to deal with families with kids. I want college campus. And he kept on going back to, what about I said, give me the campuses or I'm walking out of here. And he put 4 campuses on the table. I interviewed for 2 of them. But I knew the whole time, as soon as the 4 were put out, I knew that it was probably going to be Dartmouth. And here we are, we're starting our 22nd year here. So we've been at it for a very long time.
But without belittling New Hampshire any more than I usually do, but it's sort of far away from everything, in the sense, like, is there kosher food there? Is there a school there? Like, all these different things. You're like,
yeah, it is far. It is far. When we moved, everything. I would do these drives, whether it was to New York or to Boston, and pick up food. And but over time, everything gets delivered now, next day. I would say the biggest challenge that we faced here is our children, without a doubt. And right when we moved, I think that had somebody seriously sat me down and said, your children are your biggest shlichus, and that's how you need to be thinking about this. You're going to be successful, and the students are going to come, and you're going to build a meisid, blah, blah, blah. But your kids... But at the time, the Shluchim Online School was just getting started. And so in the back of my mind, I was like, well, this is going to succeed, and we'll have this option. And my kids did it. I had 4 kids that went through that system.
on the school online.
Yeah. And...
But by the way, I want to interrupt. When COVID hit, and everybody was, what are we going to do? Lubavitch was like, guys, we've been doing this for years. It's a no-brainer. Because they had that online.
It's funny because 2 of my kids were already out of the house and they came back for that 6 months. And my son looked at me and says, "I can't believe I'm back online. Like I never thought I'd be back doing this." There were challenges with online, but there was something very I'm seeing it now that my kids are older. I have now a son who just finished smicha. He's 21. My daughter who just finished seminary. They're very self-aware kids. They don't buckle to peer pressure. They've made decisions what is best for them, not because their friends are doing it, because they never had that. Because for the first 12, 13, 14 years of their life, it was their show. They, yes, they went on school on the computer, but then the rest of the day they had to figure out what they wanted to do and how they were going to fill their time. And so I'll just give you one example. My son, who did a couple years in Pittsburgh for Masifta, and then he went to Zal, he went for base medrash to New Haven. He calls me the second year in New Haven, and he says, Tal, all the boys now go to Holy Terra for Shir Dalet so they can go on shlichus like I was sent to New Haven. He says, I don't think this is for me. I don't think I'm going to have a good year in New York. I think it's going to be overwhelming for me. There's a group of boys that I really like, that I jive well with, that are going to want to do this pre-smicha year in South Africa. And I think I want to do that. And so we talked about it, and we spoke. It turned out to be the two best years. He was going to go for 1 year and then leave. He ended up staying for a second year. It ended up being the absolute best decision that he could have possibly made for himself. The love of learning that he gained there, the confidence, the connections, the rabbis. So there are these there are these blessings that don't seem to be apparent at the start, right? You look around, you see all the kids who were going to school. Now, I should say, my two youngest kids, my wife has had it with the online school. She doesn't want to do it anymore. So she commutes every day to Burlington, which is an hour-and-a-half drive. And my kids go to school there, and my wife teaches. So she drives in the morning, teaches, and then drives them home in the evening.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's clearly the real heroes of shlichus are definitely the children. We had on the shliach in Madison, Wisconsin, Mendel Matasov, and we heard his story. So this fits well with that narrative. Not the same, but the similar challenge of how you do that. So, were there any surprises when you came with students? Like there was things like, wow, like I didn't expect this, or I didn't know this would happen. Anything like that?
So I had that year in New Haven, and I had set up, even though I had no responsibilities, I didn't have to fundraise, and I didn't have to, pay rent or pay a salary even. I really just got to spend as much time as I could finagle with these students. So I kind of had in my mind what I wanted to be doing with them. So I think the biggest shock is that, yes, there's sitting and there's the generic upbringing with them and learning with them, but it was all sort of the what's the word I'm looking for? It was all the side stuff. It was schlepping tables and chairs and raising money and figuring that whole thing out. Like running an actual meisid was I think I knew what it all was driving towards. Right? Some people build a meisid because they want to build edifices. I really moved because of that experience and knowing what kind of an impact you could have sitting with a student for 2 hours learning Navi with them. I'd seen that. I'd engaged with that. But now I have like this responsibility. And so when I first got here, it was great. Like a student would come over, we'd learn more. We'd say l'chaim. We'd go to the frats. I'd hang out. I'd text my wife that I'm being, and I'd come home at 3 a.m. and it was a great day, right? It was a lot of fun. And then kids start coming, and all of a sudden you can't do the things that you were doing at the beginning. And so I think there's been stages where I've had to calibrate, which I was preaching to the choir, but it's. That is, I think in a lot of ways, it's life.
Yeah. No, that is life. Yeah.
Rabbi, are you going to start going into... Can you imagine Yisroel going into Alston now that he's out there? I mean, he's in the right spot, isn't he?
Yeah.
Going and hanging out.
Our son Yisroel and his wife moved to Boston to work on NBU 3 weeks ago, and Yeah, it's you know, he's been on campus. It's not he moved out. He didn't. He moved back to Boston. He's been on shlichus in Boston for since he's born.
Hmm.
Been on campus with me. He's meeting. Standing outside the sukkah, inviting. We put him out. He'd stand outside the sukkah. Now, how could anybody say no to a 6-year-old kid if they want to come into the sukkah? But yeah, so he's there and he's doing his thing. But as it's interesting you say the change as your life progresses, because there's still more coming. Let me tell you, it's going to change. There's another. The next decade and the decade after that is going to bring a lot more changes. Yeah,
I
that's what it is.
I believe it. I had this past Sunday. We had an event here at Dartmouth, and I had 4 other events that I had to be at, and so and then there's family and your children, and now I had an alum. You talk about a wedding. I'm not at this stage where I have alums getting married, but I mean, I'm assuming you were referring to an alum's child got married.
Correct.
But I went to an alum's kid's bar mitzvah, and so I'm not quite at the next generation of their kids getting married, but it's there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. I mean, Dartmouth's a smaller school, um, but they take up they take up time, and so it's about figuring that out and balancing that, the needs of others and the needs of yourself and your family needs, and um, yeah.
Right. I just want to continue on that theme of the differing things that happen. So I had 2 interactions with alums, and one was today and one was earlier this week. And the one that happened early in the week, it was actually last week. I got a video from a couple, and I had officiated at their wedding 36 years ago, and it's a 36-year anniversary. So that was one that like whoa, and she sent me and said, if you want to see a younger version of yourself. I didn't actually look at it because I'm not sure I want to deal with that, but and today I'm in New York, and so there's this one guy who actually lived next door to the Chabad house when he was in college, and he lives in Brooklyn and works in Brooklyn. And every time I'm here, I go on the way to Borough Park to KRM to the Kailo store. I stop by and put on film with him. And so I text him. He's around. I go there. So I texted him, and I was going there, and he told me he has a meeting. I have to get there on time. And I took a wrong turn, and I got all nervous. And I 10 minutes I have to leave. And I got there, ran upstairs to his office, came in and sat down. And I'm looking at him, and he's how old is he? Late 20s, early 30s maybe. And he's sitting there, and I say, Dan, you're not happy. What's going on? And he says, my father passed away. And I'm like, and I thought maybe it happened last week. It happened in January. And that was, and I felt so terrible for him because I mean, my mother passed away 4 years ago, but I know exactly how he's feeling. January is 6 months ago, but he's feeling, and he's sitting and his father worked with him. They worked together. And I just nobody else was in the office today. Usually it's one or 2 other people, and just sitting there he's tearing up, and I'm like, yikes! This is like, yeah. And then I felt like, and I didn't want to say to him why didn't you tell me? Why would he tell me? But that's another thing of keeping up with alumni. It's and the issues that they have. When their children are 6 years old, they call you for advice. When they come bar mitzvah, when they're getting married, and all along the way, even though most of them end up in other communities and have other support systems, but to some degree, sometimes they'll call you because they know you, and you have you establish a very strong connection to them, and it becomes your shlichus doubles because it's not just the 100 students that are in front of you; it's the thousands of students that are your alumni that you have some kind of, and it's very hard to figure out what is my responsibility to them. So it's great if you're fundraising from them because then you force to stay in contact with them. That helps. And actually, as I said to the guy, I know he's connected to Chabad where he lives now. I said, so how many institutions have you built in your father's name? And then before he left, he said, oh, wait, I want to write a check for you. I said, no, I don't want it. Now, the last time I was there, before his father passed away, he called me the next day and said, my father said, what do you mean? You didn't give him a check? Rabbi comes, does a mitzvah with you. You should, write a check for the institution. So I knew that he was doing it for his father. But I felt so dirty taking the check. I didn't even look how much it is. There's something in my pocket. I'm like, oh, I didn't want that. But but he said, no, I know my father wanted me to do this. Anyway, it's not just, as the shlichus evolves and gets longer and longer, it's just, the responsibilities become bigger and bigger, and you keep on learning. Like what do the first 10 years on shlichus, nobody's dying, or yeah.
There is something very unique about this age bracket also. Um, it's rare that I hear a student really gush and talk about their childhood rabbi. It happens, but it's not that common. And once they leave college, they're not really settled for the next 10, 15 years. And so you almost become this foundation, this rock in the middle of all of this maneuvering. And so, and especially at a place like Dartmouth, where there really isn't a whole lot else going on. It's not like New York City. It's not like Boston. Um, so many students come here and their parents are like, oh my gosh, I'm sending my kid to the wilderness. Um, Ironically, Dartmouth's motto is in Latin, is Vox Clamantis in Deserto, but it's really the Latin from Yeshayahu, from Shabbos Nachamu, which is Kol Kareh Bamidbar Pano Darach Lavaya, and it's a mistranslation. But this midbar, this wilderness, Dartmouth embraces it, and so when kids come here, there's this feeling of like, I'm a little isolated here. So yes, it's not just the students that are in front of me; it's the hundreds and hundreds of alums that. So it doubles your work, and it's very fulfilling, and in a sense, scratches that itch that we lose when students leave us after 4 years. This might have even been your Vart, and I'm digging back 20 years, and it sounds like something you might say, but I cannot actually attribute it to you because I don't remember. But somebody asked me once, what's the story with students coming and going? And I said, yeah, that's the hardest part. I said, you lose all the good students every 4 years, but you also lose the nudniks.
That's me. That's me.
The nice thing is there's not that many nudniks, but you know what I mean.
A guy walked into the Chabad house. Was it yesterday? Day before yesterday. Rings the door. We're going downstairs. Guy, wearing a suit. He's got a little suitcase. Obviously, he's here for a business trip. He says to me, I look at him. I don't remember who he is, and he says, "You changed my life." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "What happened?" He said, 9 years ago, I wasn't really getting so much into Yiddishkeit. My wife and I were starting to get more observant, and we moved to Boston for work, and we wanted to live near the Chabad house because we thought it's a cool place, cool part of town. And you said to me, absolutely not. You have to go live in Brookline, which is the next neighborhood over, where there's a shul and there's young adults and there's families. And he said, you literally changed my life, because when I went there, I for some reason, he lived there for 7 years. I never heard from him. And 2 years ago, he moved to Surfside. And but anyway, to me, that was like, it's like amazing. It's such amazing, because what did I do? I sat down with the guy and told him, to live in Kenmore Square with a wife and try to raise a family there. There's no community. There's me, and that's it. It's me and the Chabad house, where a married couple doesn't belong there. So it wasn't like this brilliant philosophical discussion we had. It was because it was me like being as nasty as I could to get him to move. So, but then he comes back and he remembers this in his head 9 years later. He says, "Thank you. I want to thank you for what you did for me." So those alumni that are out there, the seeds you planted, sometimes you never find out what they've grown into. Sometimes you do, and that's what the takeaway. When I walked out of this guy's office today, he said, "Why wasn't I in touch with him all this time? Why don't I pick up the phone and just call him and see how you doing, what's going on?" And I think that's. I called another alumni 2 days ago. We spoke for an hour. It's something that you have to do. You have to.
I'm taking out of what you said something a little different, which is you never know what sentence or what word is going to impact somebody. when I moved on shluchim, my father said to me, my father's has lots of advice to dispense, and it's good advice. It's all his good advice.
Absolutely.
But he says, my Shleib, think about everything that you say as if it's going to be on the front page of the New York Times. Can you stand by what you say? Out of context, in context, it doesn't matter. Like, you have to be ready to defend what you say. And I think that's a really valuable, and after a while you get good at it, and you stop thinking about it consciously. You just, you don't say dumb things. Or if you do, you make sure that it's to, people that you trust. But throughout my shlichus, I've certainly had students come to me years later and say, I remember this one thing you said, and I used to be like, oh my God, what did I say? And then they tell you something, and sometimes I remember saying that, and often I was like, yeah, that's
Right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, if when you're channeling truth, when you're channeling Torah, when you're channeling Rebbe, you just say it. And when it lands, it lands. And somebody will come back later and say, said this. I said, wow, what you just said is really brilliant. I said that. That's amazing. And because when you have that conversation, sometimes what am I going to say to this? People call you up for advice. Like, what do I know? What is this? You almost like have to like empty yourself out and like wait for the for the wisdom to come through you. Not that you're going to sit there and analyze this because you're so brilliant. And when it comes out right, where is it? I think the Rebbe was once talking about shluchim shouldn't be reading newspapers. Like, you're going to talk to one of your people, you're in a community, and you have to be up in the news. And the Rebbe said, no, that's not. What you should do is learn a mimer, learn a sicha, say a chapter of Tillim. That's how you prepare for like a major meeting with somebody you're trying to convince of something. And then when you do that, and the right thing comes out of your mouth. My wife always says that when she has a meeting with people, I just Hashem, the right things should come out of my mouth. And so later, I started talking, and I didn't realize what I was saying, and it came out exactly right. So I tell people, I don't need to remember what I say. I don't need to remember it. I'm giving it to you. If it works, keep it. If I said it, wonderful. What do I have to, I don't, it's like, oh yeah, I remember exactly what I said to you 19 years ago. Like, I used to, I don't know, throughout the years, I had like different sayings. One of the sayings is, what's going to be with you? And my wife said to me, what do you keep on saying to people? What's going to be with them? They don't know what you're talking about. And like, one girl came to me 10 years later, like, when you said that to me, I started thinking. Anyway, yeah.
I'll tell you a funny anecdotal story about this. Early on in my shlichus, I was in Crown Heights, and I was at Yasser Bashkin's house on your brother's neighbor across the street, and my mashpia from Migdal Emek was there, Ichka Gurevich, who's a real firebrand Hasidic Jew. I don't think he had a lot of patience for me when I was in yeshiva. Actually, I know he didn't have a lot of patience for me, but it's okay. And but these mashpiyim, they like to see you outside of yeshiva, right? They like to see that they succeeded and you stayed somewhat relevant and connected. And he sees me, and he and he says, "No, what do you do?" And I said, "I'm actually a shliach." And he asked me this question. It was a really funny question. He says, "What are you supposed to do right before you go into a meeting?" Now, this was back when I thought, I'm going to say something he wants to hear. I'm not going to get. So I said, "Oh, I don't know. You say Parak Tanya Balpeh or something." And he looked at me like I had fallen off the moon. And he goes, "No." I was like, "No? Okay, what?" He goes, in Yiddish, in like this blustery Yiddish, he goes, "You have to make sure your tie is straight." I don't wear ties. I haven't worn a tie. I mean, I wear a tie once a yovel. I used to wear a tie, but anyways, I thought that was really funny.
But by the way, for the audience to know, I've consistently given Moshe Leib a hard time about the way he dresses. So last week he sent me I asked him who he was. He sent me a picture posing with the chief rabbi of South Africa, correct? And your son who had just gotten smicha. And the first thing that came to my mind is his son and chief rabbi, Moshe was wearing his black hat and a suit. Everybody's wearing, and the chief rabbi's wearing a black hat and a suit. His son's wearing a black hat and a suit. But the chief rabbi and your son both were wearing ties and you weren't. I'm like, oh. He was so close to being dressed like a mensch.
I was actually wearing a kapata.
Okay, I couldn't see that now. I couldn't see so far down.
Yeah.
All right.
This is great. We're gonna have to do we're gonna have to do a follow up.
A follow up. Yeah, we'll start the mini series. So I think what
All right.
I think the beauty of this we're to bring this together is Moshe and myself the way we grew up are so different. My father, he should be well, live long. Oh man, my father's father learned in Lubavitch. My father, came to 770. He was like when he was like 10 years old. He was the first, student in 770. Grew up here. My mother, her parents, Shalom, were from Germany. Strong Orthodox. Straight, very straight. And what we have in common is that we're the shluchim of the Rebbe. And I think that's something that when you reach that point, like you're like they always talk about when people join the Israeli army, and then there's no difference. You're religious, you're not religious, you're this, you're that. Everybody's is like brothers, little like brothers on with a common mission, a common goal. And the shluchim of the Rebbe are similar. Each one of us is unique in who we are and how we do it, exactly how we do it. But all together, we're making up this army that the Rebbe wanted to bring Mashiach. And that's the bottom line. Somebody's got to do it in Dartmouth. Someone's got to do it. Whenever I speak to a guy like you who's in Dartmouth, I think, wow, Kenmore Square is like heaven. What's there to complain? The butchery's like a 5-minute drive away, and there's, there's a minyan for Mariv at 10 o'clock. If that's what makes your clock tick, you got all this stuff. And living in Dartmouth, like, and raising children on a computer, I can't imagine. So. It's very inspiring. It's very uplifting to know that what our fellow soldiers are doing in the Rebbe's army, and in some way, Chase Aaron, my producer Seth here, has joined that army. He's 75 episodes that are out there, and I don't know if you're online, Mishlei, but I tell this every shiach: you got to put stuff out online. Everybody's looking online, and if one person hears it or 10 people hear it, it took you 10 minutes to say it, and it can multiply and multiply.
Yeah.
So. That's it. Now,
Amazing.
next week, Wednesday night is Rosh Hashanah. I guess we're going to have to put it out a little bit earlier in the week. But in the meantime, wish everybody a Ksivach Simba, be written and sealed for a good, happy, and healthy new year. And we should celebrate that in Yerushalayim with Mashiach Tzidkenu.
Amen.
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 Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm having all sorts of technical difficulties over here that I've been dealing with for like the last 15 minutes.
Right, we noticed that, but it didn't interrupt the conversation. I mean, just when you have two guys on the Pos-cast in the same state, like it just blows the energy.
Yeah, I guess so, to the point where I'm no longer being told whether or not anyone's microphones are giving any input. So that's why I had no idea if you were going to be able to hear me or not, because usually it's got these little like audio bar things that are telling me what's going on, and I'm not
Well,
seeing
if this
those.
got recorded and it's going to work out, that's fine. Otherwise, it was a pleasure hanging out with Moshe for the past 45 minutes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So thank you so much to everyone for listening to episode 75 of the Pos-cast with Rabbi Shmuel Posner. Thank you, Moshe, for joining us this week, and we'll see you all next week at some point. TBD.